After a tiring and stressful week, what's your ideal stress reliever? Is it to go drinking with your friends on a Saturday night? Perhaps alcohol is the way to have fun for many of you, but could you imagine having these alcoholic beverages legally banned for an indefinite time? Well, at one point in American history, alcoholic beverages were legally banned. Let's get to know more about the Prohibition era. Hi, welcome to our channel. In this video, we're going to travel back into a time in American history called the Prohibition era, wherein alcoholic beverages were legally prevented from being manufactured, sold, and transported. But what led America to prohibition, and how did the American people react to it? Let's find out. Before we begin, we want to know, how would you personally react to an alcohol ban? Tell us in the comments below. Now let's get to know what the Prohibition era is all about. Prohibition was the legal ban on making, selling, and transporting alcoholic drinks in the United States from 1920 to 1933, according to the 18th Amendment. This nationwide ban happened because of the temperance movement, which promoted moderation or total abstinence from alcohol consumption, even though prohibition only focused on the production, transportation, and trade of alcohol, not its consumption. The temperance movement gained followers in the 1820s and 30s, fueled by the religious revival happening across the country. Religious groups played a significant role, and the Anti-Saloon League, supported by Protestant evangelical congregations, led the push for prohibition in the early 20th century. Other supporters included suffragists concerned about alcohol's impact on families and industrialists, aiming to boost worker efficiency. The origins of the temperance movement can be traced back to the early 19th century. The American Temperance Society, established in 1826, encouraged people to voluntarily avoid alcohol and influenced subsequent groups that pushed for mandatory bans on selling and importing alcoholic beverages. Various religious groups, particularly Methodists, actively participated in this movement. Women played a crucial role, with the Women's Christian Temperance Union, founded in 1873, being a prominent advocate for prohibition. During the Progressive Era, a time in the United States marked by extensive social activism and political reform efforts, aimed at combating corruption, monopolies, wastefulness, and inefficiency, the calls for prohibition became stronger. Temperance activists aimed to mitigate the negative social impacts of rapid industrialization. Saloons, known for their heavy drinking culture, were linked to immigrants and the working class, and were considered harmful to the moral values of a Christian society. The Anti-Saloon League, supported strongly by Protestants and other Christian denominations, led the campaign for nationwide prohibition. Remarkably, the Anti-Saloon League became the most influential political pressure group in U.S. history, being the only organization to successfully amend the nation's constitution. The movement gained rapid momentum, fueled by churches. By 1833, there were 6,000 local societies in various U.S. states. The idea of temperance laws was initiated by a Massachusetts law in 1838, which prohibited the sale of spirits in quantities less than 15 gallons, but was repealed 2 years later. Maine, a constituent state of the USA, enacted the first state prohibition law in 1846, triggering a series of similar state legislations before the American Civil War. Proposed by Wayne Wheeler, leader of the Anti-Saloon League, the 18th Amendment was approved by both houses of the U.S. Congress in December 1917 and ratified by the required 3/4 of the states in January 1919. This amendment called for Congress to enact enforcement legislation, a task led by Andrew Volstead, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. He successfully guided the passage of the National Prohibition Act, better known as the Volstead Act, despite President Woodrow Wilson's veto. According to the law, prohibition officially started on January 17, 1920. The legislation considered intoxicating liquor as any beverage containing at least 0.5% alcohol by volume, except for specific cases like medicinal, sacramental, or industrial use, where alcohol sales were permitted. Furthermore, doctors had the authority to prescribe alcohol for medicinal reasons and could obtain it for laboratory purposes, and these terms were often interpreted liberally. Additionally, the sale of sacramental wine notably increased in the initial years of Prohibition. And since merely owning or consuming alcohol privately wasn't against the law, many Americans still desired alcoholic drinks, and criminals began to supply them through unlawful channels. Instead of regular bars and saloons, there emerged illegal drinking establishments called speakeasies, or blind pigs, which multiplied to an estimated 200,000 by the end of the decade. People also started making their own illegal alcohol, known as moonshine, bathtub gin, or homebrewed beer. This led to the emergence of bootlegging, or the illegal production and sale of liquor, and speakeasies. Organized crime capitalized on these activities, turning the Prohibition era into a time of gangsterism, marked by fierce competition and violent clashes between criminal gangs. Before we explore more details about the wild events that happened during the Prohibition era, what are your thoughts about them so far? Tell us in the comments below. Some insightful observers anticipated that the Prohibition era in the United States, starting on January 19, 1920, would encounter significant challenges. So, what odd events happened during this time? During Prohibition, members of Congress seeking alcohol turned to George L. Cassidy, the leading bootlegger on Capitol Hill. Cassidy roamed the Congress corridors, making up to 25 illegal alcohol deliveries daily, with Capitol Police granting him access round the clock. Carrying a durable leather briefcase, he supplied various types of alcohol, including whiskey, moonshine, scotch, bourbon, and gin, to his politician friends. They even provided him a workspace in the House Office building. In 1925, he was caught smuggling 6 quarts of whiskey to a House member wearing his distinctive light green hat, earning him the nickname Man in the Green Hat. After pleading guilty, he shifted his operations to the Senate office building. His notoriety extended to Vice President Charles Curtis, who organized a sting operation in 1930, resulting in Cassidy's arrest with 6 bottles of gin and his undisclosed client list. He was sentenced to a year in prison. Cassidy later claimed he helped 80% of Congress evade Prohibition laws. When talking about the Prohibition era, it's impossible not to talk about Al Capone. Al Capone is the most renowned gangster of the Prohibition era, but surprisingly, he had a brother who worked as a Prohibition enforcement agent. While Al built his criminal empire through illegal liquor in 1920s Chicago, his oldest brother, James Vincenzo Capone, who later changed his name to Richard Joseph Hart, enforced Prohibition laws for the Federal Indian Affairs Administration on the Winnebago and Omaha tribes reservations in Nebraska. Vincenzo, the eldest of the 6 Capone brothers, concealed his identity and paid tribute to the silent movie cowboy William S. Hart. After a period in the circus, Vincenzo settled in Homer, Nebraska, where he served as the town marshal, adopting a Western-style appearance with a hat and a pair of 6 guns, earning him the nickname Two-Gun Hart. In 1922, he worked as a special officer investigating bootlegging for Indian Affairs. He was involved in a fatal shooting of a suspected bootlegger in Sioux City, Iowa, leading to a manslaughter charge, which he managed to evade. During another term as the Marshal of Homer, he faced suspicion of theft and lost his badge. In 1940, he reconnected with the Capone family, met his ailing brother Al in Miami, and started receiving financial assistance from them. He then passed away in 1952. Another fact about Prohibition is that a green-painted door often indicated the presence of a speakeasy. In Chicago, this tradition lives on through 2 well-known bars from the 1920s. The Green Door Tavern on North Orleans Street, established in 1921, is an Irish pub, and its basement also houses the Drifter, another former Prohibition speakeasy. On North Broadway, the famous Green Mill Cocktail Lounge used to be a speakeasy co-owned by Machine Gun Jack McGurn of Al Capone's outfit. Capone, also a partner in the Green Mill, had his own booth inside the lounge. In 1927, when comedian Joe E. Lewis refused to perform at the Green Mill, McGurn sent 3 men who attacked Lewis, cutting his throat and face. but he survived, with Capone covering his medical expenses. McGurn was initially charged in the 1929 St. Valentine's Day massacre, but was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. If you're wondering where the organizations that supported the alcohol prohibition are, one of them continues to exist until today. One of the earliest organizations advocating for alcohol prohibition in the United States was the Prohibition Party. Founded in 1869 with the aim of electing politicians who opposed alcoholic beverages. The Prohibition Party holds the distinction of being America's oldest third party and was the first political party to include women as members. Thomas Nast, the renowned cartoonist for Harper's Weekly in the late 1800s, chose the camel as the symbol for the Prohibition Party, as camels drink only water. Today, the Prohibition Party still exists and is largely seen as a historical oddity with minimal remaining support. Its stance continues to be against both alcohol and tobacco. In the 2012 presidential election, the party's candidate received only 519 votes nationwide. In 2016, the party nominated James Hedges from Iowa for president and Bill Bays from New York for vice president. In the Prohibition era, the consumption of hard liquor likely decreased by around 50%, and other alcoholic beverages saw a reduction of about 1/3. This led to certain positive outcomes, including a significant decline in deaths caused by cirrhosis of the liver. However, this improvement was somewhat counterbalanced by fatalities resulting from the consumption of adulterated alcohol. The 21st Amendment, approved in February 1933 and ratified on December 5, 1933, overturned the 18th Amendment, effectively ending prohibition in the United States. Post-1933, alcohol regulation became a matter handled by individual states rather than the federal government. While most states embraced alcohol, a few, including Mississippi, remained dry for several years. Mississippi was the last to lift the ban in 1966. Nevertheless, there are still localized areas where alcohol restrictions persist. After many years, many people still continue to debate whether the Prohibition era did more harm than good. For some, Prohibition was a social experiment that inadvertently encouraged the very problems it aimed to solve: criminality, corruption in public offices, and a general lack of respect for the legal system. It was indeed the wildest period in American history. What are your final thoughts on this matter? Do you think that the Prohibition era was effective in achieving its purpose? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you learned a lot through this video, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching.